Before we begin, I need to warn you. This episode contains discussions of child abduction, domestic violence, suicide attempts, and wrongful death. Listener discretion is strongly advised. In October 2025, a listener reached out to No Tears for Black Girls with a case that stopped me cold. The subject line read, quote, "3 children kidnapped due to government negligence," end quote. The email began, quote, "This case centers on the suspicious death of Timothy Paul Stone after the Arizona government allowed the kidnapping of his 3 children, 2 of whom are autistic. A tragic and disturbing example of how systemic government neglect within Arizona's child protective system can lead to preventable loss." End quote. What I discovered in the document sent to me was worse than I could have imagined. This is the story of Timothy Paul Stone, a Black father who spent the last 54 days of his life desperately trying to rescue his children from a system that not only refused to help him, but actively protected his children's abductors. Timothy's parents, Reverend John and Shirley Stone, are 69 and 75 years old. They have given me permission to tell their son's story. And nearly 2 years after Timothy's death, his 3 young sons, Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel, are still missing. This is their story. Picture this. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon on January 9th, 2024. Timothy Paul Stone pulls into the parking lot of his apartment complex at 12,945 West Greenway Road, apartment E206, in El Mirage, Arizona. He's 33 years old. He's exhausted. Just hours earlier, he was in the intensive care unit at Boswell Hospital, his blood sugar spiking over 800, his brain swelling from the diabetic crisis that nearly killed him. The doctors had stabilized him. They'd sent him home to rest. All he wants to do is see his 3 boys, hold them, tell them he's okay, tell them daddy's home. He walks up the stairs to his apartment. The door is unlocked. He steps inside. The apartment is silent. He calls out, "Winston, Timothy Jr., Marcel." No answer. He walks through the living room. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. Their bedroom. Empty. His 3 sons are gone. Timothy's hands are shaking now, not from the diabetes, from panic. He pulls out his phone and calls the babysitter, Brittany Houston. "Where are my kids? Where are my boys?" And Brittany Houston, the woman Timothy had trusted to care for his children, the woman he had let live in his home rent-free for 8 months, tells him something that stops his heart. "I took them. I put them in your car, and I gave them to Saraya." Saraya, his estranged wife. The woman who had abandoned their children 10 months earlier. The woman who had fled to Las Vegas. The woman who was under a court order to stay away from Timothy and the children because a judge had found credible threats that she would kidnap them. Timothy's worst nightmare had just come true. He calls 911. His voice is breaking. "My children are missing. They've been taken. I need help." Officer Matthew Jacobs of the El Mirage Police Department responds to the call. Timothy tells him everything. About the protective order, about Saraya abandoning the children, about Brittany having no authority to take his sons, about the court order that says Saraya is dangerous. Officer Jacobs takes notes. He files a report, and then he does nothing. The children are not rescued, Saraya is not arrested, Brittany is not charged, and Timothy Paul Stone begins a 54-day nightmare that will end with his death. But before we get to those 54 days, before we talk about what the system did to Timothy, you need to understand who Timothy was. Because the people who failed him want you to believe he was nobody. Just another Black man who couldn't get his life together. Just another angry ex-husband in a custody dispute. Just another statistic. They want you to forget that Timothy Paul Stone was a human being. A son, a father, a man who fought every single day of his life just to survive. Timothy was born February 28, 1990 in the Phoenix area. His parents, Reverend John Stone and Shirley Stone, were devoted to their son. They raised him with love, with faith, with the belief that he could be anything he wanted to be. And then, when Timothy was just 2 years old, everything changed. Imagine being a parent and watching your toddler suddenly start losing weight, drinking water constantly, wetting the bed, lethargic, sick. You take him to the doctor, terrified, not knowing what's wrong. And the doctor tells you your baby has type 1 diabetes, not type 2, not the kind you can manage with diet and exercise. Type 1, juvenile diabetes, an autoimmune disease where the pancreas stops producing insulin, where the body can't regulate blood sugar on its own, where without constant monitoring, without multiple daily injections, without vigilance every single hour of every single day, your child could slip into a coma and die. Timothy was 2 years old, and for the next 32 years of his life, he would live with a disease that could kill him at any moment. Think about what that means. Every meal calculated, every carbohydrate counted, multiple finger pricks a day to check blood sugar, insulin injections before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, before bed, waking up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat because your blood sugar dropped too low, feeling your hands shake, your vision blur, your heart race because the insulin dose was off by just a little bit. Living with the knowledge that if you forget your insulin, if you can't afford your insulin, if someone tampers with your insulin, you could die. Timothy carried this burden every day of his life, and he never let it stop him. He went to high school, he played sports, he fell in love. Her name was Saraya. They were teenagers when they met. Young love, first love, the kind of love that makes you believe in forever. They were together for over 15 years. They moved in together in 2010. They built a life, and in 2011, they had their first son, Winston Lehan Stone, born November 21st, 2011. 2 years later, July 19th, 2013, their second son arrived, Timothy Paul Stone Jr., named after his father, a legacy, a continuation. And then, in 2017, Timothy and Saraya got married. Reverend John Stone, Timothy's father, performed the ceremony. It should have been the happiest day of their lives, but by then, cracks were already forming. Saraya was struggling, mentally, emotionally. She would disappear for days, check herself into behavioral health centers, come back different, come back worse. And still, Timothy stayed. Because he loved her. Because he believed she would get better. Because they had 2 boys who needed their mother. In 2020, they had a third son, Marcel Orion Stone, born December 4th, 2020, a pandemic baby, born into a world that was falling apart, born into a family that was falling apart. And then came the diagnoses that would change everything. In 2015, Timothy Jr. started showing signs that something was different. He didn't make eye contact the way other children did. He had trouble with social interactions, repetitive behaviors, sensitivity to sounds and textures. The doctors confirmed what Timothy and Saraya had started to suspect. Autism spectrum disorder. Timothy Jr. needed therapy, special education, extra patience, extra love. Timothy gave it to him. And then in 2022, Marcel was diagnosed too. Autism spectrum disorder. 2 of Timothy's 3 sons were autistic. 2 of his 3 sons would need specialized care for the rest of their lives. Do you understand what that means? Timothy was managing a chronic illness that could kill him at any moment. He was working full-time. He was raising 3 young boys. 2 of them had special needs that required constant attention, therapy appointments, individualized education plans, sensory accommodations. And he was doing it, all of it. Timothy had worked for Cox Communications since 2012, almost 12 years with the same company. He started in an entry-level position and worked his way up. By 2024, he was a sales engineer and team leader. His colleagues respected him. His managers saw potential in him. He had a future. He was building something. He loved music. He would play it for his boys, dance with them in the living room. He loved sports. He would take Winston to games, teach Timothy Jr. how to throw a ball, let Marcel toddle around the yard. He loved to cook. He would make meals for his sons, trying to get them to try new things, laughing when Marcel made a face at vegetables. He was a good father, a present father, a father who showed up. But at home, something dark was growing, something that would eventually consume everything Timothy had built, something that would lead to his death. Soraya was deteriorating. Throughout 2022, Soraya's mental health spiraled. She was admitted to psychiatric wards multiple times. She would tell Timothy she couldn't handle the children, that she wanted to give up, that she wanted to end it all. And then, in November 2022, she stopped threatening and started acting. November 5th, 2022. Timothy described it later in court documents as a minor argument. Something small, something that shouldn't have escalated. But Soraya's reaction was anything but minor. She gathered Timothy and the children together. Winston was 11 years old. Timothy Jr. was 9. Marcel was not yet 2. And Soraya looked at them and said she wasn't strong enough, that she was going to kill herself, that they would have to live without her. She walked out of the house, just left, disappeared for hours. The children were terrified. Winston was crying. Timothy Jr., who struggles to process emotions because of his autism, was shutting down. Marcel was too young to understand, but he could feel the fear in the room. Soraya eventually came home. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She just came back. 3 days later, she did it again, November 8th, 2022. Another argument. And this time, Soraya walked into the kitchen and grabbed her prescription bottle. Antidepressants. She opened the bottle in front of Timothy, in front of Winston, in front of Marcel, and she swallowed 25 pills. The entire bottle. One after another, while her children watched. She said, "I won't be here anymore. You'll have to live without me now." She threw the empty pill bottle at Timothy's head. It hit him in the face, and she walked out the door. Timothy called 911 immediately. He was shaking. His voice was breaking. He told the operator his wife just took an entire bottle of pills. "She's trying to kill herself. My kids are here. They saw everything. Please help." The police found Soraya a few blocks away. She was fine. She hadn't actually swallowed the pills. She had put them in her mouth, walked out of the house, and spit them out. It was a performance, a show, a weapon she used against Timothy and the children to inflict maximum emotional damage. The police told Timothy what she'd done, that she had faked it, that she was manipulating him. But they didn't arrest her. They didn't charge her. They didn't remove the children from her care. They told Timothy to work it out. 6 days later, Soraya did it for real. November 14th, 2022. Another fight. Another pill bottle. But this time, Soraya actually swallowed them. 20 antidepressant pills. She called 911 herself, told them she'd overdosed, told them she wanted to die. The paramedics rushed her to the hospital. Her stomach was pumped. She was stabilized. And then she was transported to St. Luke's Behavioral Health Center, where she stayed for a week. Do you know what week that was? The week of Winston's birthday. Winston turned 11 years old on November 21st, 2022, and his mother was in a psychiatric facility because she had tried to kill herself. Timothy tried to explain it to Winston, tried to help him understand that Mommy was sick, that she needed help, that it wasn't his fault. But how do you explain that to an 11-year-old? How do you make that make sense? You can't. You just hold your son while he cries, and you tell him you love him and you promise him you'll keep him safe. But Timothy couldn't keep his promise, because the system was about to turn on him. December 11th, 2022. Saria spent 8 hours screaming at Timothy, from 10 in the morning until 8 at night, yelling, cursing, calling him names, degrading him in front of Winston, in front of Timothy Jr., in front of Marcel. Timothy took Winston outside. Father and son sat on the steps of the apartment building, and Timothy asked his boy, "Does the yelling bother you? Does it hurt you when mommy screams like that?" Winston, this brave 11-year-old boy, said yes. It hurts. Timothy explained that mommy wasn't well, that her brain wasn't working right, that maybe if Winston told her how he felt, she would stop. Winston didn't want to. He was scared. But he loved his father, and he wanted to help. So he went back inside, his hands shaking, and he walked up to his mother. "Mommy, you're hurting my feelings when you yell. Can you please stop?" Saria looked at her son. She said, "Okay, baby. For you, I'll stop." 5 minutes later, she started screaming again. Timothy had had enough. He'd watched his wife attempt suicide in front of their children. He'd endured months of verbal abuse. He'd tried to protect his sons from the chaos, but it kept getting worse. On December 18th, 2022, during another one of Saria's episodes, Timothy called 911. The Avondale police showed up, and they made a decision that would change everything. They arrested Timothy. Why? Because during the argument, Saria had been on the phone with a friend, wearing Bluetooth headphones. Timothy, trying to get her to stop yelling, had gestured toward her. The headphones fell off her head. They broke. Saria told the police Timothy had attacked her, that he'd choked her, that he'd beaten her, that he'd broken her headphones in a rage. None of it was true. Timothy had never hit her, never choked her, never laid a hand on her. She would later admit this in court. But that night, the Avondale police looked at a black man and a woman claiming abuse, and they made their choice. They handcuffed Timothy Paul Stone. They took him away from his children. They charged him with criminal damage for breaking headphones that he had purchased with his own money. And they left 3 vulnerable children in the custody of a woman who had tried to kill herself in front of them twice in the last month. The next day, December 19th, 2022, while Timothy was still in jail, Saria went to court. She filed for an order of protection. She listed herself and all 3 children as the protected parties. She claimed Timothy was violent, that he was a threat, that he had hurt her. The judge, who only heard Saria's side of the story because Timothy was incarcerated, granted the order. Timothy Paul Stone, the man who had never been violent, who had called the police for help, who had just wanted to protect his children, was now legally prohibited from going home, from seeing his sons, from being a father. On January 6, 2023, Timothy had to rent his own apartment. He was forced out of the home he'd been paying for, away from the children he'd been raising, all because of a lie. But on January 17th, 2023, something important happened. There was a hearing on the order of protection. Timothy was finally able to tell his side. And during that hearing, Saria McCree admitted the truth. She admitted Timothy had never hit her, never choked her, never hurt her physically. The judge dismissed the children from the order of protection. Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel were allowed to see their father again. But the order stayed in place between Timothy and Saria. And then, on February 1st, 2023, the Department of Child Safety got involved. A DCS specialist named Michelle Ortiz held an aftercare meeting. She reviewed the case. She spoke to both parents, and she made it clear. Both parents needed to support the children. Saria needed to continue therapy. For a few weeks, it seemed like things might stabilize. Saria was calmer. Timothy had his boys back. They were working toward a divorce. It was going to be amicable, cooperative, for the sake of the children. And then March 2023 came, and Soraya made a decision that would set in motion everything that followed. In March 2023, Soraya petitioned to dismiss the order of protection against Timothy. She didn't tell him she was doing it. She just went to court and had it dropped. Why? Because she was planning something Timothy wouldn't see coming. March 22nd, 2023. It was a Wednesday. Soraya told Timothy she needed to drop the boys off at his apartment for a little while. He didn't think anything of it. They'd been co-parenting. She'd bring the kids, he'd watch them, she'd come back. But this time was different. Soraya pulled up to Timothy's apartment. She brought Winston inside, then Timothy Jr., then little Marcel, who was only 2 years old and still being breastfed. She set them down. She told them, "Be good for Daddy. I'll see you soon." And then she walked out. She got into the family car, a 2018 Ford Escape with license plate DNA7ME, a car that was in Timothy's name, a car she had no legal right to take, and she drove to Las Vegas, Nevada, to her sister, Heiress Dupree's apartment at 1750 Karen Avenue, apartment 158. She didn't come back that night, or the next night, or the night after that. Timothy called her. No answer. He texted her. No response. He asked when she was coming to get the boys. Silence. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And Soraya McCree never came back. She had abandoned her children. All 3 of them. Left them with their father and disappeared across state lines. For the next 10 months, from March 2023 to January 2024, Soraya McCree did not contact Winston, Timothy Jr., or Marcel. Not a phone call. Not a text message. Not a birthday card. Not $1 of child support. Nothing. Timothy became a single father overnight. He was working full-time at Cox Communications, managing his type 1 diabetes, raising 3 boys, 2 of them autistic, 1 of them still in diapers. And he did it. Every day. He got up, he checked his blood sugar, he gave himself insulin, he made breakfast for his boys, he got Winston ready for school, he worked with Timothy Jr. on his therapy exercises, he changed Marcel's diapers, he went to work, he came home, he made dinner, he helped with homework, he gave baths, he read bedtime stories, he tucked them in. He was everything those boys needed. Father and mother, provider and caretaker, their entire world. But Soraya wasn't done with them, because on April 5th, 2023, 2 weeks after abandoning her children, Timothy's phone rang. It was Soraya, and she wasn't alone. Her sister, Heiress Dupree, was on the call too, and they had a message for Timothy. If you keep asking for child support, if you keep trying to get the car back, we're going to come to Arizona. We're going to hurt you, and we're going to take those kids. Timothy, a man who had never been in a fight, who had never threatened anyone, who just wanted to raise his children in peace, was now being threatened with violence and kidnapping by the mother of his children and her sister. He recorded the conversation. He saved the threats. And the next day, April 6th, 2023, he went to the El Mirage Municipal Court. He filed for an order of protection, not just for himself, for Winston, for Timothy Jr., for Marcel. The case was assigned to Judge Michael Parascandola. Timothy presented the evidence, the recorded threats, the abandonment, Soraya's history of mental instability, the suicide attempts, the fear that she would follow through on her threat to kidnap the children. Judge Parascandola reviewed everything, and he made a finding. He found that there were credible threats of kidnapping and abuse, that Soraya McCree and Heiress Dupree posed a danger to Timothy and the 3 children. On April 6, 2023, Judge Parascandola issued 2 separate orders of protection, one against Soraya McCree, one against Heiress Dupree. Both orders listed Timothy Paul Stone, Winston Stone, Timothy Jr. Stone, and Marcel Stone as the protected plaintiffs. The orders were clear. Soraya and Harris were prohibited from contacting Timothy or the children. They were not to come near them. They were not to approach them. They were to stay away. Judge Parascandola ordered the El Mirage police to immediately serve the orders. The orders were sent to Las Vegas. Deputy Sheriff Robert Wyant of the Clark County Sheriff's Office was assigned to serve them. On April 19, 2023, Deputy Wyant went to 1750 Karen Avenue, apartment 158. He knocked on the door. Heiress Dupree answered. He served her with the order of protection. She took it. It was done. But Soraya? Soraya wouldn't come to the door. Deputy Wyant tried on April 7, 2023. No answer. He tried again on April 12th. No answer. He tried again on April 14th. No answer. He tried again on April 20th. No answer. 4 attempts to serve Soraya McCree with a court order designed to protect 3 children. 4 times, she hid. 4 times, she evaded service. On April 21st, 2023, Deputy Wyant filed an affidavit with the court. In it, he stated that he had spoken with Heiress Dupree, that Heiress had confirmed Soraya was living there, that Soraya knew the police were trying to serve her, and that Soraya McCree was intentionally evading service of the order of protection. Soraya knew. She knew there was a court order. She knew a judge had found her to be a danger to her children. She knew she was supposed to stay away, and she hid from it. For the next 9 months, that order of protection kept Timothy and his boys safe. Soraya stayed in Las Vegas. She stayed away. The boys had stability. They had routine. They had their father. Timothy thought the worst was over. He thought he'd protected his children. He thought they were safe. But in April 2023, someone else entered Timothy's life. Someone who would betray him in the worst way possible. Someone who would help Soraya McCree do exactly what Judge Parascandola's order was designed to prevent. Her name was Brittany Houston, and she told Timothy she needed help. Timothy met Brittany Houston through Soraya. They were best friends, had been for years. When Soraya abandoned the family in March 2023, Brittany reached out to Timothy. She told him she was going through a hard time. She had her own children, 8 of them. She was struggling. She needed a place to stay. And Timothy, because he had a good heart, because he believed in helping people, said yes. In April 2023, Brittany Houston moved into Timothy's apartment at 12,945 West Greenway Road, apartment E206. The arrangement was simple. She would help Timothy with the boys, watch them when he was at work, help with meals, with bedtime, with the chaos of raising 3 children, 2 of them autistic. In exchange, she could live there rent-free. She wouldn't have to pay utilities. She could get back on her feet. Timothy showed Brittany the orders of protection, the ones against Soraya and Heiress. He made it clear, these women are not allowed near my children. If they contact you, you tell me. If they show up, you call the police. My boys are protected by court order, and I need you to help me keep them safe. Brittany said she understood. She said she would protect the boys. She said Timothy could trust her. For months, the arrangement seemed to work. Brittany watched the children. Timothy worked. The boys had stability. Winston was doing well in school. Timothy Jr. was making progress in therapy. Marcel was growing, hitting milestones, learning to talk. But behind the scenes, something else was happening, something Timothy didn't know about. Brittany Houston was still in contact with Soraya McCree. They were still best friends, and they were talking, planning, coordinating, and Brittany Houston had secrets. Dangerous secrets. On December 6th, 2023, Brittany Houston was at Surprise Elementary School. There was an incident. Witnesses said Brittany became aggressive with a teacher, that she assaulted a 14-year-old student. The El Mirage police were called. When they arrived, they arrested Brittany Houston for aggravated assault on a minor and assault on a school faculty member. And when they ran her name through the system, they found something alarming. Brittany Houston had 8 active bench warrants, 8 separate warrants for her arrest, all of them related to crimes against her own minor children. 8 warrants, and she'd been living in Timothy's home, caring for his children, for months. Brittany's mother posted bond. Brittany was released, and she came back to Timothy's apartment like nothing had happened. Timothy was horrified. He'd trusted this woman with his sons, with Winston and Timothy Jr. and Marcel, and she had 8 warrants for crimes against children. He told her she needed to leave, that she was fired, that he would give her time to find another place, but she couldn't stay. She couldn't be around his boys anymore. On January 2nd, 2024, Timothy went to the El Mirage Municipal Court, the same court where Judge Parascandola had issued the orders protecting him from Soraya and Ares. Timothy filed a petition for an order of protection against Brittany Houston. In the petition, Timothy detailed what he'd discovered: the arrest, the warrants, Brittany's violent behavior, the threats she'd made against him when he told her to leave. He listed himself and all 3 children as the plaintiffs who needed protection. Judge Parascandola reviewed the petition, and he denied it. No order of protection was granted. Brittany Houston was free to stay in Timothy's home, free to be around his children, despite the warrants, despite the violence, despite everything. Timothy was terrified, but he had no choice. He couldn't physically remove her. He couldn't change the locks and risk her retaliating. He had to keep working, had to keep providing for his boys, had to keep managing his diabetes and his job and his life. And then, on January 3rd, 2024, something strange happened. Timothy's insulin went missing. Timothy was meticulous about his insulin. He had to be. His life depended on it. He kept it in the refrigerator, same place, every day. He checked it multiple times a day, made sure he had enough, made sure it was stored properly, made sure it was safe. But on January 3rd, when Timothy went to get his insulin for his evening injection, it wasn't there. He searched the refrigerator, the cabinets, the bathroom, his bedroom, everywhere. It was gone. He asked Brittany if she'd seen it. She said no. She didn't know where it was. Maybe he misplaced it. Timothy knew he hadn't misplaced it. But what could he do? He went to the pharmacy, got an emergency supply, came home, put the new insulin in the refrigerator. On January 5th, 2024, 2 days later, the missing insulin reappeared. Brittany found it. She brought it to Timothy, said it had been in the refrigerator the whole time, that he must have just overlooked it. But Timothy looked at the vial. Something was wrong. The seal looked tampered with. The liquid looked slightly different. Not quite the right consistency. Not quite the right color. He didn't use it. He threw it away, kept using the new supply from the pharmacy. But the damage was already done. On January 9th, 2024, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Timothy Paul Stone woke up feeling wrong. His vision was blurry. His head was pounding. His skin felt hot and dry. His mouth was so dry he could barely swallow. He checked his blood sugar. Over 800. For reference, normal blood sugar is between 70 and 100. Anything over 180 is considered high. Over 250 is dangerous. Over 400 is a medical emergency. Timothy's blood sugar was over 800. He was in diabetic ketoacidosis. His body, unable to use glucose for energy because of the lack of insulin, was breaking down fat instead. The process was producing ketones, acidic compounds that were poisoning his blood. His brain was swelling, his kidneys were failing. Without immediate treatment, he would slip into a coma and die. Timothy called 911. The ambulance arrived. The paramedics loaded him onto a gurney. And at 2:30 in the morning on January 9th, 2024, Timothy Paul Stone was rushed to Boswell Hospital and taken directly to the intensive care unit. The doctors worked quickly. Intravenous fluids to rehydrate him, insulin drip to bring down the blood sugar, monitoring for brain swelling, for kidney function, for cardiac arrest. Timothy was critical. He could have died. But he didn't. The doctors stabilized him. By 10 in the morning, his blood sugar was coming down. The swelling in his brain was reducing. The ketones were clearing. He was going to survive. The doctors discharged him around noon with strict instructions. Rest. Monitor your blood sugar closely. Take your insulin exactly as prescribed. Come back immediately if you feel any symptoms returning. Timothy went home. But while Timothy was in the ICU fighting for his life, something else was happening. Something that would destroy him more than any diabetic crisis ever could. Brittany Houston had called Saria McCree. Saria, who had abandoned the children 10 months earlier. Saria, who was under a court order to stay away from them. Saria, who had evaded service of that order 4 times in Las Vegas. Saria, who had not contacted her sons in nearly a year. Brittany told Saria that Timothy was in the hospital, that he was in the ICU, that the children were alone in the apartment with her. And Saria told Brittany exactly what to do. Take the children, put them in Timothy's car, and bring them to me. At some point between 2 a.m. when Timothy left in the ambulance and 4 p.m. when he returned home, Brittany Houston walked into the bedroom where Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel were sleeping. She woke them up. She told them to get dressed. She said they were going to see their mother. Winston, who was 12 years old, asked where Daddy was. Brittany said Daddy was sick, that he was in the hospital, that their mother wanted to see them. Timothy Jr., who was 10 years old and autistic, started to get upset. He didn't understand. He didn't like sudden changes. He wanted his father. Brittany told him to be quiet, to get in the car. Marcel, who was 3 years old, was crying. He wanted his daddy. He didn't remember his mother. He hadn't seen her in 10 months. He was scared. Brittany didn't care. She took Timothy's car keys, the keys to the 2018 Ford Escape that Saria had stolen and used to flee to Las Vegas the year before. The car that Timothy had somehow gotten back. The car that was his only transportation. She forced all 3 boys into the car. She locked the doors. And she drove away from 12,945 West Greenway Road, away from the only home those boys had known, away from their father. She drove to Mesa, Arizona, to the Cube Smart Storage Facility on East McKellips Road, and there, waiting for her, was Saria McCree, the woman who had abandoned these children, the woman who was under court order to stay away from them, the woman who had threatened to kidnap them. Brittany Houston handed Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel over to Saria McCree. And then she drove back to El Mirage, back to Timothy's apartment, like nothing had happened. When Timothy came home at 4 p.m., the apartment was silent. He called out for his boys. No answer. He checked their room, empty. Their beds were unmade, their shoes were gone, their jackets were gone. Panic set in. He called Brittany. Where are my kids? Where are my sons? Brittany's voice was cold, detached. I took them to their mother. Timothy felt his world collapse. You what? Where? Where did you take them? I'm not telling you. Timothy's hands were shaking. You had no right. You had no authority. There's a court order. She's not allowed near them. Where are they? Where are my children? Brittany hung up. Timothy immediately called 911. It was 4:47 p.m. on January 9th, 2024. The El Mirage Police Dispatch recorded the call. Timothy's voice was breaking, frantic, desperate. My children are missing. My babysitter took them without my permission. She gave them to their mother, who is under a court order to stay away from them. I need help. I need my children back. Please help me." Officer Matthew Jacobs was dispatched to 12,945 West Greenway Road, apartment E206. He arrived with backup. They took Timothy's statement. Timothy showed them the orders of protection, the ones from April 6th, 2023. The ones that listed Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel as protected plaintiffs. The ones that prohibited Saria McCree from coming near the children. He showed them the court file number, M0759 P02 023 000017. He showed them that the order had been issued by Judge Parascandola, that it was valid, that it was active. Officer Jacobs reviewed the documents. He confirmed that the orders were legitimate. He confirmed that Saria McCree was prohibited from contact with the children. He confirmed that Brittany Houston had no legal authority to remove the children from Timothy's custody. And then Officer Jacobs did nothing. He didn't go to CubeSmart. He didn't track down Saria McCree. He didn't arrest Brittany Houston. He didn't issue an Amber Alert. He didn't treat this as a kidnapping. He filed a report. Case number 24-000456. And he left. Timothy was devastated. He called his father, Reverend John Stone. He was sobbing. "Dad, they took my boys. The police won't help me. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're safe. What do I do?" Reverend Stone, 69 years old, dropped everything. He and his wife, Shirley, 75 years old, drove to Timothy's apartment. They found their son in a state of complete despair. His blood sugar was still unstable from the morning's crisis. His hands were shaking. He couldn't stop crying. The three of them stayed up all night, calling police stations, calling the courts, trying to figure out what to do, how to get the children back, how to make someone listen. The next morning, January 10th, 2024, Timothy went back to the El Mirage Municipal Court. He filed an emergency petition for an order of protection against Brittany Houston. In the petition, Timothy detailed everything. That Brittany had forcibly removed his 3 children from his home on January 9th, 2024, without his permission or authority. That she had transported them in his stolen vehicle to an unknown location. That she had delivered them to Saria McCree, who was under an existing order of protection, to stay away from the children. That the children were in danger. Judge Parascandola held a hearing that same day. He reviewed the petition. He acknowledged that on January 9th, 2024, Brittany Houston had unlawfully abducted the children without authorization and transported them to Saria McCree and Harris Dupree, both of whom were under previous protective orders. Judge Parascandola issued an order of protection against Brittany Houston. The order listed Timothy Paul Stone, Winston Stone, Timothy Jr. Stone, and Marcel Stone as the protected plaintiffs. The order prohibited Brittany from contacting Timothy or the children. It granted Timothy exclusive use of the residence. It ordered law enforcement to immediately serve the order on Brittany Houston. The El Mirage police were dispatched to serve the order. They went to Timothy's apartment, where Brittany was still living. When the officers arrived at the door, Brittany Houston opened it. She saw the police. She saw Timothy standing there, and she smiled. She looked Timothy in the eyes and said, "You will never see your kids again." And then she took the order of protection from the officer's hand, turned around, and walked back into the apartment. The police did nothing. They didn't arrest her for the kidnapping. They didn't charge her with custodial interference. They didn't force her to tell them where the children were. They served the paper, and they left. Timothy stood in the hallway of his own apartment building, unable to go inside because Brittany was there, unable to go home, unable to sleep in his own bed, and he realized something terrible. The system was not going to help him. The courts had given him protective orders, but the police were not going to enforce them. Saria had his children. Brittany had helped her take them. and no one in authority cared. Over the next few days, Timothy and his father, Reverend Stone, tried everything. They called the El Mirage Police Department every day. They called the Mesa Police Department. They called the Maricopa County Sheriff. They called Child Protective Services. No one would help. On January 15th, 2024, 6 days after the kidnapping, Timothy and Reverend Stone went to the El Mirage Police Department in person. They demanded to speak to an officer. They needed an update. They needed to know what was being done to rescue the children. 2 officers, names redacted in the reports, but referred to as John Doe officers, met with them in the parking lot. They pulled up the case on their patrol car's computer system. The officers confirmed everything. Yes, the orders of protection against Soraya McCree and Heiress Dupree were valid and active. Yes, the children were listed as protected plaintiffs. Yes, Soraya McCree was prohibited from contact with the children. Yes, the orders had been issued by Judge Paris Condola. The officers told Timothy and Reverend Stone that they understood the seriousness of the situation, that they acknowledged Soraya, Heiress, and Brittany represented a danger to the children, that the protective orders were in place for a reason. And then the officers said something that would haunt Timothy for the rest of his life. "We know where the children are. We believe they're at the Cube Smart Storage Facility in Mesa, where Soraya McCree works. But you cannot go there yourself. You cannot try to get your children back. That's our job. We will handle it. Do not take matters into your own hands." Timothy asked when they would go get the children. The officers said soon. They said they were working on it. They said to be patient. Timothy and Reverend Stone left the police station believing that help was coming, that the police were going to rescue Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel, that the nightmare was almost over. But days passed, then a week, then 2 weeks, and the police did nothing. Timothy called every day. Every single day he called the El Mirage Police Department and asked for an update. "Where are my children? When are you going to get them? Why haven't you arrested Soraya? Why haven't you charged Brittany?" The answers were always the same. "We're working on it. We're investigating. Be patient." But Timothy was running out of patience, and he was running out of time. By late January 2024, Timothy's health was deteriorating. The stress of the kidnapping, combined with his diabetes, was destroying him. His blood sugar was spiking constantly. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He'd lost weight. His brain fog was getting worse. He was having trouble concentrating at work. But he kept fighting, because his boys needed him, because Winston and Timothy Jr. and Marcel were out there somewhere, scared, confused, wondering why their father hadn't come to get them. On January 25, 2024, Timothy and Reverend Stone drafted a formal criminal complaint. They titled it, quote, "Certified Criminal Complaint, a Child Abduction Alert," end quote. The complaint was addressed to Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs, Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays, and all Arizona state and federal law enforcement agencies. The subject line read, quote, "Your urgent help requested and needed to locate and bring home safely the 3 minors listed herein that were taken from their home on January 9th, 2024. End quote. The complaint detailed everything: the kidnapping, the protective orders, the police failure to act, the danger to the children. It cited Arizona statutes that had been violated: ARS Section 13-1302, custodial interference; ARS Section 13-1304, kidnapping; ARS Section 13-3623, child abuse; ARS Section 8-531, child abandonment. The complaint explained that Timothy had called 911 on January 9th, 2024, that the El Mirage police had responded, that they had confirmed the protective orders, and that they had refused to rescue the children. The complaint stated, quote, "El Mirage police, by their own acts and non-acts, when there is a duty to act, are continuing to block access to 3 missing children, 2 of which are autistic. They have spoken to the child abductor/kidnapper and continue to keep the location of their whereabouts concealed while threatening the father and others with harm if they attempt to locate and rescue the children." End quote. Timothy and Reverend Stone had the complaint notarized on January 25, 2024. They attached a missing persons poster with photos of Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. 3 beautiful black boys smiling at the camera, innocent, vulnerable, missing. On January 26, 2024, they officially served the complaint. They sent copies by email to Governor Katie Hobbs, to Attorney General Chris Mays, to El Mirage Mayor Alexis Hermosillo, and to El Mirage Police Chief Paul Marzoka. Reverend Stone personally hand-delivered a copy to the Arizona Attorney General's office at 2005 North Central Avenue in Phoenix. Reverend Stone personally hand-delivered a copy to the Arizona Attorney General's office at 2005 North Central Avenue in Phoenix. And then they waited. On January 29, 2024, at 11:32 a.m., Governor Katie Hobbs responded. Her email was brief. She acknowledged receipt of the criminal complaint. She said her office would review it and get back to them. That same day, at 9:43 a.m., before the governor had even responded, Police Chief Paul Marzoka sent an email to Timothy and Reverend Stone. The email said, quote, "Mr. Stone, I have my investigations bureau looking into this matter." End quote. Timothy and Reverend Stone were cautiously hopeful. Finally, someone in authority was paying attention. Finally, the governor and the police chief were taking this seriously. Finally, the children would be rescued. At 12:11 p.m., Timothy and Reverend Stone responded to Chief Marzoka's email. They emphasized the urgency. They wrote, quote, "2 of the children are autistic, and every minute that passes further endangers my children." End quote, with the word children in all capital letters. They attached copies of the Arizona statutes that had been violated. They explained the police department's accomplice criminal liability for aiding the kidnapping, for blocking the children's rescue, for hindering the arrest of the kidnappers, and for grossly violating the children's rights while obstructing justice. They sent the email and waited for Chief Marzoka's response. At 4:35 p.m. on January 29, 2024, Chief Marzoka responded, and his response shattered any hope Timothy had left. The email said that Officer Matthew Jacobs had reported that, quote, "At the time the 3 minor children were taken without the decedent's permission, the decedent was incapacitated." End quote. Incapacitated. Because Timothy had been in the ICU. Because he'd been fighting for his life against diabetic ketoacidosis. Because his blood sugar had been over 800 and his brain had been swelling. The police were using Timothy's disability against him. They were claiming that because he'd been hospitalized, Brittany Houston had the right to take his children. That because he was physically unable to stop her at that exact moment, the kidnapping didn't count. Chief Marzoka's email continued. He stated that Officer Jacobs had advised Timothy at the time that they had conducted a proper and thorough investigation, and that the El Mirage Police Department would not be rescuing the children or apprehending the kidnappers. Timothy and Reverend Stone responded immediately. They sent a detailed rebuttal. They explained that Timothy being in the hospital did not give Brittany Houston authority to take the children, that she was not a legal guardian, that she was not family, that she had no custodial rights whatsoever. They explained that even if Timothy had been incapacitated, which he wasn't because he was discharged and came home that same day, the children should have been turned over to family, to Timothy's parents, to someone with legal authority, not to a woman who was under court order to stay away from them. They cited the law. They cited the protective orders. They begged Chief Marzoka to reconsider, to do his job, to rescue 3 innocent children. There was no response. Chief Marzoka never replied again. The governor's office never followed up. The Attorney General's office never took action. The El Mirage police never went to CubeSmart to get the children. The Mesa police never arrested Soraya McCree. 3 black children, 2 of them autistic, 1 of them only 3 years old, were being held against their will in violation of court orders. And every single person in authority who could have helped them chose to do nothing. Timothy was breaking. On February 1st, 2024, 3 weeks after the kidnapping, Timothy called Soraya McCree. He was desperate. He was furious. He was terrified for his children. The conversation escalated. Timothy, under extreme emotional duress, threatened Soraya. He told her that if she didn't return the children immediately, if she hurt them in any way, there would be consequences. He would make sure she paid for what she'd done. It was a mistake. Timothy knew it was a mistake the moment the words left his mouth, but he was a father who hadn't seen his children in 3 weeks. A father who'd been told by the police to wait, to be patient, to let them handle it. A father who'd watched the system fail his sons over and over again. And Soraya McCree, the woman who had abandoned those children for 10 months, who had evaded a court order designed to protect them, who had conspired with Brittany Houston to kidnap them, called the police. She called 911 and reported that Timothy had threatened her. Mesa Police Officer Damian Ryden, badge number 23685, was dispatched to the CubeSmart storage facility at 135 East McKellips Road in Mesa, Arizona. Officer Ryden spoke with Soraya McCree. She told him about Timothy's phone call, about the threats. She said she was scared, that she just wanted to keep the children safe. She didn't mention that she'd abandoned them, didn't mention the protective order, didn't mention that she'd evaded service 4 times, didn't mention that the children had been kidnapped. Officer Ryden called Timothy. And instead of asking Timothy why he was so desperate, instead of checking to see if there were court orders in place, instead of doing his job, Officer Ryden threatened Timothy Paul Stone. He told Timothy that if he tried to come get his children, there would be consequences, that he, Officer Ryden, would personally make sure Timothy was arrested, that he had spoken with the El Mirage police and they agreed with his handling of the situation. Officer Ryden told Timothy to leave Soraya alone, to stop harassing her, to stop trying to find his own children. And then Officer Ryden did something even worse. He encouraged Soraya McCree to go to court and get her own protective order against Timothy, to legally block him from his children, to use the system to cover up the kidnapping. Shortly after Officer Ryden's call, Timothy received another call. This one from a John Doe officer with the El Mirage Police Department. The officer repeated the same threat. Stay away from Soraya. Stop trying to get your children, or you'll be arrested. Timothy hung up the phone and realized something horrific. The police weren't just refusing to help him, they were actively protecting his children's kidnappers. They were using their authority to keep him away from Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. They were participants in the crime. On February 5th, 2024, Timothy and Reverend Stone drafted an addendum to the January 25th certified criminal complaint. They detailed the new developments, Officer Ryden's threats, the El Mirage officer's threats, the complete failure of law enforcement to enforce the protective orders or rescue the children. They sent the addendum to Governor Hobbs, Attorney General Mays, Mayor Hermosillo, and Chief Marzoka. No one responded. On February 13th, 2024, they drafted a second addendum. More details, more evidence, more desperate pleas for someone, anyone, to help. No one responded. But something else was happening. Something Timothy didn't know about yet. Because while the El Mirage police were refusing to serve Soraya McCree with the April 6th, 2023 protective order, someone else was trying. Timothy had hired a private process server, Hot Shots Process Service, and on February 21st, 2024, 10 months after Deputy Sheriff Wyant had tried and failed to serve Soraya in Las Vegas, the process server succeeded. They got into the secure CubeSmart storage facility in Mesa. They found Saria McCree, and they served her with the order of protection, the one from April 6th, 2023. The one that prohibited her from being near Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. Saria took the order. She read it. She knew exactly what it said, that she was the defendant, that the children were the plaintiffs, that she was legally required to stay away from them, and she ignored it. She kept the children. She didn't bring them back to Timothy. She didn't turn herself in. She didn't acknowledge that she was violating a court order. She just kept Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel in her custody, as if the order didn't exist. By late February 2024, Timothy Paul Stone had been separated from his children for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of not knowing if they were safe. 6 weeks of not being able to hug them, read to them, tuck them in at night. 6 weeks of Winston missing school. 6 weeks of Timothy Jr. missing his therapy appointments. 6 weeks of Marcel crying for his daddy. Timothy's health was collapsing. His blood sugar was staying elevated constantly, over 600, over 700, sometimes over 800. His body was in a constant state of ketoacidosis. His kidneys were struggling. His vision was blurry. His brain fog was so severe he could barely think straight. But on February 29th, 2024, Timothy did something incredibly brave. He went back to court one more time. He filed an emergency motion with Judge Parascandola. The motion was titled, quote, "Emergency Motion for Violations of this Court's Order and Motion in the Interest of Justice and to Prevent the Furtherance of a Miscarriage of Justice." End quote. In the motion, Timothy laid out everything. That Saria McCree had been served with the protective order on February 21st, 2024. That she had been in violation of the order for 6 days before requesting a hearing. That she was currently, at that very moment, holding the children in gross violation of the court's order. That she refused to release them as the court had commanded. The motion cited ARS Section 13-3602, interfering with judicial proceedings. ARS Section 13-2810, contempt of court. It detailed how Saria had evaded service in Las Vegas in April and May of 2023. How she had waited until after being officially served to request a hearing, showing her willful disregard for the court's authority. Timothy wrote, quote, "The defendant has displayed to this court that she is subject to disregard any order this court issues. The defendant has also shown that she will abandon her children whenever she feels like it. She believes there should be no consequences for emotionally abusing her children." End quote. He pointed out that Saria knew 2 of the children were autistic, that her actions were, quote, "cold-blooded," end quote. That she had made the children watch her attempt suicide on 2 separate occasions, then abandoned them for months, then orchestrated their kidnapping. Timothy attached the certified criminal complaints as exhibits. He asked the court to read them, to understand the full scope of what had happened. He asked Judge Parascandola to force Saria to abide by the protective order, to return the children immediately, to order the El Mirage Police, the Mesa Police, and the Maricopa County Sheriff to enforce the order and arrest Saria for her violations. Judge Parascandola scheduled a hearing for March 4th, 2024. Timothy was hopeful, terrified, but hopeful. Finally, a judge would hear him. Finally, someone would make Saria bring the children back. Finally, after 54 days, he would see Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel again. He marked March 4th on his calendar. He prepared his evidence. He wrote down everything he wanted to say to the judge. He practiced his testimony with his father. He told his boys, through messages relayed by others, that Daddy was coming, that he was going to bring them home, that everything was going to be okay. March 4th, 2024, was 3 days away. But Timothy Paul Stone would never make it to that hearing, because on March 2nd, 2024, something happened. Something that ended Timothy's fight. Something that left 3 boys orphaned and 2 elderly parents destroyed. On March 2nd, 2024, the El Mirage police received a call. It was a welfare check request for 12,945 West Greenway Road, apartment E206. 3 John Doe officers were dispatched. They arrived at the apartment. They knocked on the door. No answer. They used the building manager's key to enter. Inside, they found Timothy Paul Stone. He was unresponsive. His body was cold. There were no signs of trauma, no signs of a struggle. He was just lying in his bed, like he'd gone to sleep and never woken up. The officers called it in. The medical examiner was notified. Timothy Paul Stone, 34 years old, was pronounced dead. The police called Reverend John Stone. "Your son is dead. We found him in his apartment. We don't know what happened. You need to come identify the body." Reverend Stone, 69 years old, collapsed. His wife Shirley, 75 years old, screamed. They couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what they were being told. Their son was dead. Their baby boy. The child they'd raised, who'd fought diabetes his entire life, who'd been such a good father to his own children, who'd been trying so hard to bring his boys home. Gone. The autopsy report has never been publicly released. The cause of death has never been officially confirmed. But the timeline tells a story. Timothy had been in diabetic ketoacidosis multiple times in the previous 2 months. His blood sugar had been dangerously high for weeks. The stress of the kidnapping had been destroying his body. He'd lost weight. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating properly. His organs were shutting down. And for 54 days, he'd begged for help. For 54 days, he'd told every person in authority that he was in danger, that his children were in danger, that he needed someone to intervene. And for 54 days, they'd told him to wait, to be patient, to let the system work. The system killed Timothy Paul Stone. On March 4th, 2024, 2 days after Timothy's death, the hearing he'd scheduled was still on the court calendar. Judge Parascandola's courtroom, 9 a.m. Reverend John and Shirley Stone went to the hearing. They were in shock. They'd barely slept. They were wearing the same clothes they'd worn to identify their son's body. But they went. Because Timothy had fought so hard for this hearing, because the children were still out there, because someone had to speak for Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. Saraya McCree was there, in person. Eris Dupree was with her. They walked into the courtroom like they had every right to be there. Judge Parascandola called the case. Before he could begin, Reverend Stone stood up. "Your Honor, I need to inform the court. Timothy Paul Stone passed away 2 days ago. My son is dead." The courtroom went silent. Judge Parascandola looked at the papers in front of him. He looked at Saraya McCree. He looked at Reverend and Shirley Stone, this elderly couple who'd just lost their son, who were begging for their grandchildren. And Judge Parascandola refused to rule on Timothy's emergency motion. He said he had read it. He acknowledged it. But he would not address the violations Saraya had committed. He would not order the children returned. He would not enforce his own protective order. Shirley Stone stood up. She was crying. "Your Honor, please. The children are still protected under the order. Timothy is gone, but the children are still listed as plaintiffs. They still need protection. Saraya is still violating the order. Please help them." Judge Parascandola told Shirley Stone that he would make a note of her concerns in the record, but that he did not have jurisdiction to rule on the felonies alleged in Timothy's emergency motion, that the matter needed to go to Superior Court and law enforcement, the same law enforcement that had refused to help Timothy, the same law enforcement that had protected Saraya, the same law enforcement that had told Timothy to wait and be patient while his children were being held hostage. Judge Parascandola then did something that defies explanation. He dismissed the protective order against Saraya McCree. the order that he himself had issued on April 6, 2023. The order that listed Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel as protected plaintiffs. The order that Saria had evaded for 10 months, violated for 6 weeks, and was actively violating at that very moment by keeping the children from their family. Judge Parascandola dismissed it. He said the children's father was dead. That changed things, that he couldn't enforce the order anymore. But the children were still alive. Winston was 12, Timothy Jr. was 10, Marcel was 3. They were still the plaintiffs on that order. They were still in danger from Saria McCree. The order was still supposed to protect them. But Judge Parascandola dismissed it anyway. Saria McCree and Heiress Dupree walked out of that courtroom with smiles on their faces. They still had the children. No one was going to make them give the boys back. No one was going to arrest them. No one was going to hold them accountable. Timothy had died trying to save his sons, and even in death, the system refused to help him. Reverend John and Shirley Stone walked out of that courtroom destroyed. They'd lost their son, and now they'd lost any hope of getting their grandsons back. But the nightmare wasn't over, because Saria McCree had one more way to hurt Timothy Paul Stone, even in death. She was about to steal everything he'd left behind. Reverend John and Shirley Stone walked out of that courtroom destroyed. They'd lost their son, and now they'd lost any hope of getting their grandsons back. But the nightmare wasn't over, because Saria McCree had one more way to hurt Timothy Paul Stone, even in death. She was about to steal everything he'd left behind. But the nightmare wasn't over, because Saria McCree had one more way to hurt Timothy Paul Stone, even in death. She was about to steal everything he'd left behind. On March 9th, 2024, 7 days after Timothy's death, Reverend John Stone received a phone call from Cox Communications. It was the Human Resources Department. They were calling about Timothy's life insurance policy through MetLife. Timothy had been a dedicated employee for almost 12 years. He'd worked his way up from an entry-level position to sales engineer and team leader. And like many responsible parents, he'd taken out a life insurance policy through his employer to protect his children if anything ever happened to him. The HR representative explained the policy details to Reverend Stone. Timothy had listed the beneficiaries as follows. Primary beneficiary, Saria McCree. Contingent beneficiaries, Reverend John Stone and the 3 children, Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. Reverend Stone felt sick. Timothy had set up that beneficiary designation years earlier, when he and Saria were still together. When he still believed she would be there for their children. Before the suicide attempts. Before the abandonment. Before the kidnapping. Timothy had never updated it. He'd been so focused on getting his children back, on fighting the system, on surviving each day, that he hadn't thought to change his life insurance beneficiaries. And now, Saria McCree, the woman who had abandoned those children for 10 months, who had conspired to have them kidnapped, who had violated court orders to stay away from them, who was actively keeping them from their family, was about to receive a life insurance payout from the man whose death she may have caused. On March 13th, 2024, Saria posted on Facebook. The post said, quote, "I was kept from my children for almost 10 months." End quote. Read that again. I was kept from my children for almost 10 months. Saria McCree publicly admitted on social media that she knew she'd been separated from the children for 10 months. She knew about the protective order. She knew she wasn't supposed to be near them. She'd known the entire time, and she violated the order anyway. On March 18th, 2024, Reverend John Stone sent a notarized letter to MetLife. In the letter, he contested Saria McCree's designation as beneficiary. He explained that Saria had abandoned the children, that she was under court order to stay away from them, that she had orchestrated their kidnapping, that she was currently holding them in violation of that order. He attached copies of the protective orders, copies of the certified criminal complaints, copies of police reports, copies of court filings, everything documenting Saria's abandonment, her evasion of service, her violations, her conspiracy with Brittany Houston. He invoked the Slayer statute. This is a legal principle that exists in most states, including Arizona. It says that a person who unlawfully and intentionally kills another person, or who substantially participates in causing that person's death, cannot inherit from that person or benefit from their life insurance. Reverend Stone argued that Saria's actions had directly contributed to Timothy's death, that the stress of the kidnapping, combined with Timothy's diabetes, had killed him, that Saria and her co-conspirators had emotionally and psychologically tortured Timothy for 54 days, that they had stolen his insulin, that they had prevented him from getting medical care, that they had used his chronic illness as a weapon against him. MetLife responded that they would investigate, that they needed time to review the documentation, that they would make a determination. Weeks went by, then months. Reverend Stone sent additional documentation, more evidence, more proof. He followed up repeatedly, called their office, sent certified letters, begged them to do the right thing. And then, on April 10th, 2024, Reverend Stone received 2 phone calls that changed everything. The first call was from Eris Dupree, Saria's sister, the woman who had threatened to kidnap the children back in April 2023, the woman who had been served with a protective order, the woman who had been helping Saria hide the children in Nevada. Eris left a voicemail, and in that voicemail, she said something that proved the entire conspiracy. She told Reverend Stone that Timothy deserved his torturous death, that he had brought it on himself, that he should have just left Saria alone. And then she admitted it. She admitted that she had told Brittany Houston to take the children on January 9th, 2024, that it had been her idea, that she and Saria had planned it together. Reverend Stone recorded the voicemail, saved it. It was a confession, a direct admission of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The second call came later that same day. This one was from Saria McCree herself. Saria left her own voicemail, and what she said was even more chilling. She told Reverend Stone, quote, "I knew Timothy was going to die," end quote. Not, "I'm sorry for your loss." Not, "I wish things had been different." Not, "I'm devastated that the father of my children is gone." I knew Timothy was going to die. What did she mean by that? Did she know his health was failing because of the stress she'd caused? Did she know about the insulin tampering? Did she and Brittany plan something more sinister than just kidnapping the children? Reverend Stone sent both voicemails to MetLife. He sent them to the Attorney General's office. He sent them to the FBI. He sent them to every authority who would listen. These were confessions, evidence of a conspiracy, proof that Saria and Eris had orchestrated Timothy's torture and possibly his death. And on September 11th, 2024, 6 months after Timothy's death, MetLife made their decision. They refused to disqualify Saria McCree as the beneficiary. Why? Because according to MetLife, the El Mirage police report from January 9th, 2024, the day of the kidnapping, didn't specifically list the allegations that Reverend Stone was making. The same El Mirage Police Department that had refused to rescue the children. The same police department that had ignored Timothy's 911 call. The same police department that had protected Saria and threatened Timothy. The same police department that had filed a minimal report specifically designed to cover up the kidnapping. MetLife used that inadequate police report as justification to pay Saria McCree, the woman who had abandoned her children, who had violated court orders, who had conspired to kidnap them, who had admitted on a recorded voicemail that she knew Timothy was going to die. She got the money. Every penny that Timothy had set aside to protect his children if something happened to him went to the woman who had destroyed his life. Reverend John and Shirley Stone were devastated. They were 69 and 75 years old. They were on fixed incomes, Social Security and pension checks. And now they had to pay for their son's funeral, pay for attorneys, pay for the fight to get their grandchildren back, all while Soraya McCree cashed a life insurance check. But Reverend Stone refused to give up, because Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel were still out there, still missing, still in danger. On July 26, 2024, Reverend John Stone, as the personal representative of Timothy Paul Stone's estate, filed a wrongful death lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court. The lawsuit named Soraya McCree, Brittany Houston, Eris Dupree, Officer Matthew Jacobs, El Mirage Police Chief Paul Marzocca, the City of El Mirage, Mesa Police Officer Damian Ryden, and the City of Mesa as defendants. The lawsuit alleged wrongful death, kidnapping, custodial interference, civil rights violations, conspiracy, elder abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and insurance fraud. The case was assigned to Judge Joseph Herod. On August 8, 2024, Reverend Stone filed 8 emergency motions. Motions to compel the defendants to appear, motions to enforce the protective orders, motions to locate and rescue the children, motions for temporary restraining orders, motions for injunctive relief. The children had been missing for 7 months. Every day that passed was another day of trauma, another day of Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel wondering why their father hadn't come to get them, why their grandparents couldn't find them, why no one was saving them. On August 9, 2024, the case was reassigned, from Judge Herod to Judge Aaron Ryan Toohill. And Judge Ryan Toohill denied every single motion, all 8 of them, denied. She didn't hold hearings, didn't require the defendants to respond, didn't acknowledge the urgency, just denied them. Reverend Stone appealed. He filed objections. He explained that the children were still missing, that they were still in danger, that every moment counted. On September 12, 2024, something extraordinary happened. Judge Margaret Zabor, who was not assigned to the case, held what she called a negotiation hearing. Judge Zabor met with Soraya McCree's attorney, and according to court records, Judge Zabor encouraged Soraya to remain in Nevada, to stay hidden, to avoid Arizona jurisdiction. Judge Zabor told Soraya's attorney that as long as Soraya stayed in Nevada, the Arizona courts couldn't force her to return the children, that she should not cooperate with the lawsuit, that she should wait it out. A sitting Arizona judge was advising a defendant in a kidnapping case to evade justice. Reverend Stone was horrified. He filed complaints against Judge Zabor. He filed motions to have her recused. He demanded to know why a judge who wasn't even assigned to the case was meeting secretly with defendants and advising them how to avoid accountability. No one responded. No disciplinary action was taken. Judge Zabor faced no consequences. And then, in late September 2024, Reverend Stone received legal advice that broke his heart. His attorneys told him that the Maricopa County Superior Court was too corrupt, that the judges were protecting each other, that Judges Herod, Ryan Toohill, and Zabor were coordinating to obstruct the case, that he would never get justice in state court. They advised him to withdraw the lawsuit, to refile in federal court, where the judges might actually follow the law. On October 3, 2024, Reverend John Stone voluntarily dismissed the wrongful death lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court. He'd spent thousands of dollars on filing fees and attorney costs. He'd endured months of judicial obstruction, and he was back to square one. But he didn't give up, because those 3 boys were still out there. On November 7, 2024, Reverend John Stone, individually and as personal representative of the estate of Timothy Paul Stone, filed a federal lawsuit in the United States District Court for the District of Arizona. The case number is CV 24-04158-PHXSMB, Judge Susan M. Branovich presiding. The lawsuit is 47 pages long. It names 18 defendants: Saraya McCree, Brittany Houston, Eris Dupree, Officer Matthew Jacobs, El Mirage Police Chief Paul Marzoka, the City of El Mirage, Mesa Police Officer Damian Ryden, the City of Mesa, Judge Michael Parascandola, Judge Joseph Herod, Judge Aaron Ryan Tuhill, Judge Margaret Zabor, the State of Arizona, Cox Communications, MetLife Insurance, and several John Doe officers and Jane Doe CPS workers whose identities are not yet known. The lawsuit alleges violations of federal civil rights under 42 United States Code, Section 1983. Conspiracy to violate civil rights under 42 United States Code, Section 1985. Wrongful death. Kidnapping under 18 United States Code, Section 1201. Custodial interference. Elder abuse. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Negligent infliction of emotional distress. Insurance fraud, judicial misconduct, obstruction of justice. The lawsuit details everything: Timothy's entire story, the 54 days of hell, the 200 ignored warnings to government officials, the police refusal to rescue the children, the judicial obstruction, the insurance fraud, the ongoing kidnapping. The lawsuit demands the immediate location and return of Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel to their family. It demands compensatory damages for Timothy's wrongful death, for the children's trauma, for Reverend John and Shirley Stone's suffering. It demands punitive damages against every defendant who participated in this conspiracy. It demands injunctive relief to prevent this from ever happening to another family. On November 18, 2024, Reverend Stone filed emergency motions for preliminary injunction and temporary restraining order. He asked the federal court to immediately compel Nevada authorities to locate the children, to enforce the Arizona protective orders across state lines, to arrest Saraya McCree for kidnapping, to rescue Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel before another day passed. As of today, December 1st, 2025, that lawsuit is still pending, the emergency motions are still pending, and the children are still missing. Let me repeat that. As of today, December 1st, 2025, Winston Stone, Timothy Paul Stone Jr., and Marcel Orion Stone have been missing for 692 days. 692 days since Brittany Houston forced them into a car and delivered them to a woman who had abandoned them. 692 days since they've seen their grandparents. 692 days since they've been home. 692 days since they've been safe. Winston is now 13 years old. He's missed over a year and a half of school. He's missed birthdays, holidays, his entire childhood. He last saw his father in a hospital bed on January 9th, 2024. He doesn't know his father is dead. He doesn't know his father fought for 54 days to bring him home. He doesn't know his father died trying to save him. Timothy Jr. is now 11 years old. He's autistic. He needs routine, structure, therapy, special education services. He was getting all of that with his father. Now he's being held by a woman who hasn't cared for him in years, a woman who doesn't understand his needs, who sees him as a trophy, not a child. Marcel is now 4 years old. He was 3 when he was taken. He barely remembers his father. He doesn't remember living in the apartment on West Greenway Road. He doesn't remember his grandparents. His entire conscious memory is of being held by strangers who tell him lies about why his family doesn't want him. These children are victims of a crime that is still ongoing. Every single day they remain with Saraya McCree is another count of kidnapping, another violation of federal law, another moment of trauma. And the people who could rescue them, Governor Katie Hobbs, Attorney General Chris Mays, the FBI, the Department of Justice, are doing nothing. Now let me address the question that some people ask when they hear stories like this. the question that defense attorneys love to use to confuse juries and minimize the severity of parental abduction. Is it a crime to kidnap your own child? The answer is yes, absolutely yes. Under Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-1302, custodial interference occurs when a person, knowing or having reason to know that the person has no legal right to do so, takes, entices, or keeps a child from the child's lawful custodian. This is a Class 3 felony, punishable by up to 8.5 years in prison. Under Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-1304, kidnapping occurs when a person knowingly restrains another person with the intent to interfere with the performance of a governmental function. When that restraint involves a child under 15 years of age, it's a Class 2 felony, punishable by up to 12.5 years in prison. But this case goes beyond Arizona state law, because when Saria McCree took those children and kept them in Nevada, she violated federal law. Under 18 United States Code Section 1201, kidnapping becomes a federal crime when the victim is transported across state lines. The penalty is up to 20 years in federal prison. And if the victim is under 18 years old, there's no statute of limitations. The crime can be prosecuted at any time. The Parental Kidnapping Prevention Act, 28 United States Code, Section 1738A, requires states to enforce child custody determinations made by other states. Nevada is legally required to honor Timothy's Arizona custody order and the protective orders issued by Judge Parascandola. So yes, it is absolutely a crime to kidnap your own child, especially when there's a court order saying you're not allowed near that child, especially when you've been found by a judge to pose a danger to that child, especially when you've evaded service of that order and violated it repeatedly. Saria McCree is not a mother trying to protect her children. She abandoned them for 10 months. She didn't send a birthday card, a text message, $1 of child support. She only wanted them back when Timothy tried to formalize custody. She only wanted them back to hurt him. And it worked. The stress of losing his children, combined with his diabetes, killed Timothy Paul Stone. Now let's talk about the systemic failures that made this possible. Because this wasn't just one bad actor. This was an entire system that chose, repeatedly and deliberately, to fail a Black father and his 3 Black children. Timothy Paul Stone sent over 200 warnings to government officials. 200 times, he told people in authority that his children were in danger, that they'd been kidnapped, that he needed help. He called 911 and the police refused to rescue them. He filed protective orders and the police refused to enforce them. He sent certified complaints to the governor and she did nothing. He sent complaints to the attorney general and she did nothing. He begged the police chief and was told his disability made him unfit to parent. This is called the state-created danger doctrine. It's a legal principle established in Descheny versus Winnebago County Department of Social Services. The Supreme Court ruled that while the government generally has no duty to protect citizens from private violence, it does have a duty when the government's own actions create or increase the danger to a citizen. The El Mirage police created danger when they told Timothy not to rescue his own children, promising they would do it, and then never did. They affirmatively prevented him from protecting his boys, and then abandoned those boys to their abductors. The Mesa police created danger when Officer Ryden threatened Timothy and encouraged Saria to get a protective order against him, helping her cover up the kidnapping. Judge Parascandola created danger when he issued protective orders, acknowledged the children were in danger, and then dismissed those orders after Timothy died, even though the children were still listed as protected plaintiffs. Judges Herod, Ryan Toohill, and Zabor created danger when they obstructed the wrongful death lawsuit, denied emergency motions to rescue the children, and advised Saria to stay hidden in Nevada. This wasn't negligence. This was deliberate indifference. This was a conspiracy of government officials to deny Timothy Paul Stone and his 3 children their constitutional rights. And this is part of a pattern a pattern of how the system treats Black fathers. When Black fathers seek help from police, they're arrested. Timothy called 911 for help with Soraya's mental health crisis, and he was the one who got handcuffed. When Black fathers seek protection from courts, they're dismissed. Timothy filed for protective orders with evidence of threats and abandonment. And Judge Paris Scandola later dismissed them even though the danger to the children hadn't changed. When Black fathers try to protect their children, they're threatened. Timothy was told by multiple officers that if he tried to rescue his own sons, he would be arrested. When Black fathers have disabilities, their conditions are used against them. Timothy's diabetes, a chronic illness he'd managed successfully for 32 years, was cited by Police Chief Marzocca as justification for allowing the kidnapping. If Timothy had been a white father, if he'd been a police officer's son, if he'd been a lawyer or a doctor or a city council member, would Governor Hobbs have ignored 200 warnings? Would the El Mirage police have refused to rescue 3 kidnapped children for 54 days? Would judges have obstructed his lawsuit and advised the kidnapper to stay hidden? No. We all know the answer is no. This is also a disability rights violation. 2 of Timothy's 3 sons are autistic. They're members of a protected class under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The government had a heightened duty to protect them from abuse and neglect. Timothy himself was disabled. Type 1 diabetes is a recognized disability under the ADA. He was entitled to equal protection under the law, not discrimination based on his medical condition. And let's talk about Reverend John and Shirley Stone. They're 69 and 75 years old. They lost their son. They've been denied access to their grandchildren for 692 days. They've spent their retirement savings on attorneys, court fees, and private investigators trying to find Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. This is elder abuse, financial exploitation, emotional abuse. The government's failure to help them, combined with the defendant's intentional infliction of suffering, has caused them severe physical and mental distress. Reverend Stone has developed heart problems from the stress. Shirley Stone has been hospitalized multiple times, their elderly victims being tortured by a system that was supposed to protect them. So where are the children now? Based on the most recent information in the federal lawsuit, Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel are believed to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, with Soraya McCree and Harris Dupree. The last confirmed location was the CubeSmart storage facility at 135 East McKellips Road in Mesa, Arizona, where Soraya was working in early 2024. But after the lawsuit was filed, Soraya disappeared. She's believed to have fled back to Nevada, to the area around 1750 Karen Avenue, apartment 158, the address where Deputy Wyant tried to serve her in 2023. But here's the problem. Nevada authorities claim they can't locate her. They say they've tried to serve her with court papers related to the federal lawsuit, but she's evading service again. Just like she did in April and May of 2023. Just like she's done her entire life. Hiding, running, using the children as shields. The children could be anywhere. They could still be in Las Vegas. They could have been moved to California, to Utah, to another state entirely. Soraya could have changed their names, changed their appearances, enrolled them in school under false identities. Or she could be keeping them isolated, hidden away where no one can find them. This is why this episode is so important. Someone somewhere knows where these children are. Someone has seen them. A neighbor, a teacher, a store clerk, a caseworker. If you live in Nevada, if you live in the Las Vegas area, if you see 3 Black children, a 13-year-old boy, an 11-year-old boy, and a 4-year-old boy, who look like they might be the Stone children, please call the authorities. If you have any information about Soraya McCree's whereabouts, about Harris Dupree's location, about where these children might be, you can contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. You can contact Reverend John Stone through the federal court case. These children have been missing for 692 days. Every day that passes is another day of psychological damage. Another day of wondering why no one is coming to save them. Another day of trauma that will take years of therapy to heal. If you're listening to this and you have any power to help, I'm begging you. Governor Katie Hobbs, if you're listening, you received Timothy's certified criminal complaint in January 2024. You said you would look into it. You never did. 3 children are still missing. You have the power to intervene. Use it. Attorney General Chris Mays, you received Timothy's complaint. You received the evidence. You have the power to open a criminal investigation into the El Mirage Police Department, into the Mesa Police Department, into the judges who obstructed justice. You have the power to prosecute Saria McCree, Brittany Houston, and Harris Dupree for kidnapping. Use it. FBI Director Christopher Wray, this is a federal kidnapping case. Children were transported across state lines. Federal protective orders are being violated. 18 United States Code, Section 1201 has been violated every single day for 692 days. Open an investigation. Find these children. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Timothy Paul Stone was denied equal protection under the law because of his race and his disability. His children were denied protection because they're Black and autistic. This is a clear violation of 42 United States Code Section 1983. Investigate, prosecute, make this right. MetLife Insurance Company, you paid a life insurance benefit to a woman who may have caused the policyholder's death. You ignored months of evidence showing abandonment, kidnapping, and conspiracy. You relied on a falsified police report to justify that payment. The Slayer statute should have prevented Saria McCree from benefiting. Reverse your decision. Pay the contingent beneficiaries, Reverend Stone and the children, as Timothy intended. And to everyone listening, here's what you can do right now. Share this episode. Share it on every social media platform you have. Tag Governor Katie Hobbs. Tag Attorney General Chris Mays. Tag your local news stations. Tag national news outlets. Use the hashtags Justice for Timothy Stone, Bring the Stones Home, No Tears for Black Girls. Contact Arizona officials. Call Governor Hobbs' office at 602-542-4331. Call Attorney General Mays' office at 602-542-5025. Call the El Mirage Police Department at 623-9728-AD-260. Tell them you know about Timothy Paul Stone. Tell them you know about the missing children. Tell them the world is watching and they need to act. Contact your federal representatives. If you live in Arizona, call your congressperson, call your senators. Demand they put pressure on the FBI and DOJ to investigate this case. Contact the media. Call your local news stations. Call national outlets. The Root, BET, News One, Essence, The Griot. Tell them about this case. Send them this episode. Demand they cover it. Support the Stone family. The federal lawsuit is ongoing. Legal fees are mounting. If there's a way to financially support Reverend John and Shirley Stone in their fight to get their grandchildren back, I'll post that information on the No Tears for Black Girls website and social media. And if you're in Nevada, if you're in Las Vegas, if you see anything, say something. 3 children's lives depend on it. Timothy Paul Stone was born February 28, 1990. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 2 and fought that disease every single day for 32 years. He met his high school sweetheart, Saria, and built a life with her. They had 3 beautiful boys, Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel. Timothy worked hard. He provided for his family. He loved music, sports, and cooking. He was a devoted father who showed up for his children every single day. When Saria's mental health deteriorated, when she attempted suicide in front of the children, when she became abusive, Timothy tried to get help. When she abandoned the family, he stepped up and became both mother and father to 3 boys, 2 of them with special needs. When Soraya threatened to kidnap the children, Timothy went to court and got protective orders. He did everything right. He followed every rule. He trusted the system. And the system killed him. For 54 days, from January 9th, 2024, to March 2nd, 2024, Timothy Paul Stone fought to rescue his children. He called the police every single day. He filed court motions. He sent criminal complaints to the governor, the attorney general, the mayor, the police chief. He documented everything. He kept records. He never gave up. His body was shutting down. His blood sugar was staying dangerously high. His organs were failing. But he kept fighting because Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel needed him. On March 2nd, 2024, 2 days before his hearing to force the system to rescue his children, Timothy Paul Stone died alone in his apartment. He was 34 years old. He never got to see his boys again. Never got to hold them. Never got to tell them he loved them. Never got to bring them home. Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel are still out there, still missing, still waiting for someone to save them. 692 days and counting. This is why No Tears for Black Girls exists, because Black women are disrespected, abused, and forgotten by systems that were never designed to protect us. But Black men suffer too. Black fathers like Timothy who love their children, who fight for their families, who do everything right and still lose everything. Black children like Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel, who are invisible to a system that sees them as less valuable, less worthy of rescue, less deserving of justice. Black elders like Reverend John and Shirley Stone, who are being tortured in their final years by a government that treats them like they don't matter. No more. No more silence. No more acceptance. No more tears without action. Timothy Paul Stone's story will not be forgotten. His children will not be abandoned. This family will get justice. Before we close, I need to be transparent with you about what we still don't know about this case. Because this is an ongoing investigation, there are critical questions that remain unanswered. We don't know Timothy's official cause of death. The autopsy report has not been publicly released. We don't know if it lists diabetic ketoacidosis, natural causes, or if the death is still under investigation. We don't know if the Maricopa County Medical Examiner performed toxicology tests that could confirm or rule out the insulin tampering that occurred on January 3rd through 5th, 2024. We don't know if anyone has been arrested. Despite recorded confessions from Heiress Dupree admitting she told Brittany Houston to take the children, despite Soraya McCree's voicemail saying she knew Timothy was going to die, despite 692 days of ongoing kidnapping, we don't know if any criminal charges have been filed against Soraya McCree, Brittany Houston, or Heiress Dupree. We don't know the exact current location of the children. The federal lawsuit states they are believed to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, with Soraya McCree and Heiress Dupree. But we don't know if they've been physically seen or confirmed to be there. We don't know if they're enrolled in school. We don't know if they're receiving the therapy and medical care that Timothy Jr. and Marcel need for their autism. We don't know what Nevada authorities have done. We don't know if the Las Vegas Police, Clark County Sheriff, or Nevada Child Protective Services have been contacted about locating the children. We don't know if they've attempted to serve Soraya with the federal lawsuit papers or if she's evading service again, like she did in 2023. We don't know the current status of the federal lawsuit. The case was filed November 7th, 2024. Emergency motions were filed November 18th, 2024. But we don't know if any hearings have been held. We don't know if the defendants have filed responses. We don't know if Judge Susan Brnovich has ruled on any of the emergency motions to locate and rescue the children. We don't know if MetLife paid Soraya the life insurance money. We know they refused to disqualify her as beneficiary on September 11th, 2024. But we don't know if they've actually issued the payment, how much the policy was worth, or if the federal lawsuit has frozen those funds. We don't know why the insulin went missing. We know it disappeared on January 3rd. We know it reappeared on January 5th with a tampered seal and different appearance. We know Timothy threw it away and refused to use it. We know 6 days later his blood sugar spiked over 800 and he nearly died. We know 54 days later he was dead. But we don't know if that vial was ever recovered and tested. We don't know if it was poisoned or contaminated. We don't know if Brittany Houston, who was living in Timothy's apartment and had access to his medication, tampered with it. We don't know why no one in authority helped. We know Timothy sent over 200 warnings. We know Governor Katie Hobbs acknowledged receiving his complaint. We know Police Chief Paul Marzocca responded to his emails. We know judges read his emergency motions, but we don't know why they all chose to do nothing. We don't know if there's been any internal investigation into the El Mirage Police Department's refusal to rescue the children. We don't know if any officers have faced disciplinary action. And we don't know if Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel even know their father is dead. We don't know if Soraya told them. We don't know if they think their father abandoned them. We don't know if they're waiting for him to come save them. We don't know if they ask about him. We don't know if they cry for him at night. These are the questions that haunt Reverend John and Shirley Stone every single day. These are the answers we're fighting to uncover. And these are the reasons why this case cannot be forgotten, cannot be ignored, and cannot be allowed to disappear. If you have information that can answer any of these questions, if you know where the children are, if you've seen them, if you work for an agency that has information about this case, please come forward. Contact the FBI. Contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Contact No Tears for Black Girls. The Stone family deserves answers. Timothy Paul Stone deserves justice. And Winston, Timothy Jr., and Marcel deserve to come home. I'm Samantha Paul, and I'm begging you, don't let this be just another episode you listen to and forget. Share this. Act on this. These children are running out of time. If you have any information about the location of Winston Stone, Timothy Paul Stone Jr., or Marcel Orion Stone, please contact the FBI immediately at 1-800-225-5324. You can also reach out through the No Tears for Black Girls website. All tips can be submitted anonymously. The federal lawsuit, Stone v. McCree et al., case number CV24-04158, PHXSMB, is public record and can be accessed through the United States District Court for the District of Arizona PACER system. Winston, Timothy Jr., Marcel, if somehow you ever hear this, your father loved you more than anything in this world. He fought for you until his last breath. Your grandparents are still fighting for you, and we will never stop until you're home. Stay loved, stay blessed, stay safe. Until next time, hopefully I'll see you there. This is No Tears for Black Girls.